I used to be a private investigator. And as a private investigator, you're trying to find things out, things that you don't know. And an interview, properly considered, is an investigation. If you know what questions you're going to ask and you know what the answers are to those questions, why bother? What's the point? You should be there to find out something that you didn't know, something that you did not expect to hear, to learn something. And I think that is at the heart of what an interview should be about. Pure and simple, an investigation.
And to do that, do you find it very, very useful to let your subjects go, to have a lot of pauses? For example, just the sort of thing that doesn't really work in this setting, but to let things hang.
You should try it out. Don't be so sure.
Well, actually, no, actually, Jonathan Demme, who I interviewed on stage here a couple of years ago, said the trick that he uses most successfully is that when the person is talking, he simply does not reply. And then the seconds go by, and sometimes the minutes. And inevitably, he says, the person will feel compelled to fill the space and come out with something you wouldn't have heard otherwise. And to which my response was, I don't think it works in this setting. Well, do you? I mean, now I'm compelled to jump in. Do you? Well, I mean, do you let your subjects hang themselves sometimes?
I remember reading a story years ago. It's in a novel by Andre Malraux about the perfect executioner. The executioner who is so skillful at beheading people that they don't even know that they have been executed. And the condemned is standing before the executioner and finally says, "Well," and the executioner smiles, "Just nod your head." I don't think that interviews are really about executing people. There's this idea, I think it's a kind of bad idea, that interviews have to be adversarial. I think you may recall at the very beginning of this, there was the question of who is going to win here. There is an idea of winning or losing, getting a confession of some sort. Can I make the subject cry or beg for mercy? There's a documentary film that I often reference, a film that I love, that no one seems to have seen. The Emperor's Naked Army Marches On. Has anyone seen that movie here? Oh. Yeah. It's about a man named Mr. Okazaki, whose brother was condemned to death on trumped-up charges by his commanding officers, shot and then eaten. And Mr. Okazaki has always been really irritated by this. The injustice, the cannibalism, there are all kinds of reasons that I could imagine. And he wants an apology from the Emperor of Japan. as well as from those officers who ate his brother. It's one of those I am sorry things. So he tours Japan in a van with loudspeakers. He visits a couple of these officers, now elderly. It's one of my very favorite things in documentary films. He goes into this house, pleasantries are exchanged, there's a lot of Japanese subtitles, tea is served, a conversation begins. And then suddenly Mr. Okazaki interrupts and he says, "That is not an answer. An answer is yes or no." And then the guy continues talking, more subtitles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then suddenly Mr. Okazaki leaps over the table and starts beating the shit out of his subject. Now, let's be honest here. This is every interviewer's dream. Have I ever done it? I am really sorry to say, no, I have not. And I worry that it might be in bad taste. It might be misunderstood, misconstrued. You want to learn something, but the question is how you go about learning something. Am I just prattling on?
No, I was just thinking that you don't come after your subject, but sometimes they come after you when it's all over, and they see that maybe they didn't look quite as authoritative as perhaps they thought when they were presenting themselves.
That's a really good word, authoritative.
Well, we all think we're authorities on our own lives, at least, mistakenly.
I was sued, and I am still being sued, and I probably will be sued forever by Joyce McKinney, the subject of my film Tabloid.
I smell a second movie here.
Well, I wanted to write a book about the lawsuit because it really fascinated me. And I was going to call it So Sue Me. But it's still ongoing. And this may be really deeply disingenuous on my part, and if so, tell me I can take it. But I really tried to make her look good. And I captured something about her on film that I think is endlessly powerful and interesting. Because that's my job. I'm not a social worker. You know, I'm not making documentary versions of Free Willy. At least I hope not. I'm trying to capture my subject and the complexity of my subject and the complexity of the world around them. And if I've done that, then I kind of, sort of think I've done my job. Whether it's Joyce McKinney or Robert S. McNamara, Fred Lucher, or